Kappa Cannoneer is the solution we need to destroy Delver in the Legacy format. I played the Legacy Showcase this past weekend to a top 32 finish with this list, beating Delver 3 times, and my 3 losses were to Urza's Sagas. The deck is very explosive, offering many ways to Chalice, Emry, or Urza's Saga on turn 1 with a lot of support artifacts and Force of Will to protect your plays. On the top end we have Affinity synergies with Thoughtcast, Thought Monitor, and Kappa Cannoneer to drown out the opponent in card advantage, value, and also pressure. This deck beats up on Delver as you have an explosive deck with Chalice of the Void and many ways to disrupt Murktide by blocking it with Psy, blocking with Thought Monitor, or just outracing it. We do play against Delver in this video, so you want to watch until the end, but that's about it. Let's get into the league. Round 1 starts off with a pretty amazing hand. We have a turn 1 Emry and a Thoughtcast to help us draw extra cards down the line. Our opponent just plays a Plains and says go. As we top deck a Mishra's Bauble, we can play both our Petals, both our Baubles, play Thoughtcast to try and draw a blue land, and we do find it, so now we can slam the Emry too. If we didn't draw the land, we still had the other Lotus Petal to back us up. I sacrifice one of my Mishra's Baubles, and as I want to be thoughtful of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, I play my other Lotus Petal and say go. We bauble in their draw step as well, they Solitude the Emry, play a Stoneforge Mystic, getting Kaldra, and passing back the turn. We rip like absolute beasts, top decking a Psy and a Force of Will. We can play the Mox Opal and the Aether Spellbomb, which allows us to bounce the Kaldra complete, making it very awkward for the opponent. They play a Sanctum Prelate on 0 and ship back the turn. Now, if you thought the top decks were ending, that ain't true. Cannoneer off the top of the deck, we can hardcast it as well as keep up Aether Spellbomb to still bounce the Kaldra complete. This is insane, let's slam it. I just want to highlight how good Kappa Cannoneer is in Legacy. It has Ward 4, so it's extremely hard to kill by things like Swords to Plowshare, Solitude, and other efficient removal spells. It also triggers when any artifact enters the battlefield, making it unblockable and putting a +1/+1 counter on it. This card is so insanely powerful, and the fact that we can play 3 copies and consistently cast it, and if we don't need it, pitch it to Force of Will, makes it great. One good thing about Force of Will is that when we flood, we can hardcast it, which is a play we will consistently do in this deck. Now, we did top deck an Urza's Bauble, but don't forget about that Sanctum Prelate preventing us from casting it, so we have to make a construct and attack in with our unblockable creature. They play a Flicker Wisp, target our construct, but we can sacrifice that to side to get some value, and now we can get an artifact and attack in with our unblockable Kappa Cannoneer. That was an insanely good top deck, as well as the Psy. Sometimes you just win Magic games because you can top deck. Anyways, going into boarding, we want all the removal spells in. 3 Dismember, 2 Engineered Explosives, we want the slow Chalices out, as well as Mishra's Bauble because of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. In game 2, we're on the draw and we have a nice Dismember hand with the Force of Will and 2 Sagas. I decide to Force of Will the Aether Vial as I want to punish hands that use Wasteland so that they'll be casting their spells a lot slower if they're going to Wasteland this turn 1 Saga. We do top deck a Mishra's Bauble, so now we can play Bauble, Opal, Bauble, and have Dismember up. Well, the opponent then plays Plains and Serenity, essentially losing me the game. Let me know in the comment section down below if Force of Will on that Aether Vial turn 1 was the right play, because we're about to lose to this Serenity. Death and Taxes does Death and Taxes things, double Rishadan Pour and Pressure just ruins my hand and we don't top deck any more fast mana. Anyways, going into the third game, we have the absolute nuts turn 1 again, we have the fast Emry, and we also have Psy to follow up with on turn 2, or even a Thought Monitor depending on what happens. We slam the Emry, sack the Mishra's Bauble, and say go. The opponent does have Pithy Needle naming our Emry, so we can't activate it, but again we rip Ancient Tomb off the top of the deck. Now we can Psy, play our Lotus Petal, and we can Thought Monitor on the next turn. The opponent plays 2 Aether Vials and passes back. We rip Engineered Explosives off the top of the deck. They have 3 1-drops in play. We don't have any 1-drops, so let's play our Engineered Explosives, get a Thopter token, sacrifice the Engineered Explosives. We can now use Emry because Pithy Needle was destroyed. We can get back our Mishra's Bauble, then we can cast Thought Monitor. Oh yes, like we didn't need any more help. Kappa Cannoneer off the top of the deck, so even if they do have Serenity, they are almost dead next turn, and if Serenity pops, then we have Psy as well as Emry sticking behind. I think you can all see where this game is going. GG's onto the next one. Starting off the next round, we're on the play with not only a turn 1 Chalice on 1, but with a Mox Opal Lotus Petal, we can cast the Emry and mill for 4. Let's see if these things resolve. With Chalice hitting the table, we now can safely slam this Emry and see what they do on their turn. With just a Flooded Strand go, it's clear that they have either cantrips or removal spells with 1 CMC in their hand that they can't cast. Finding a Lotus Petal off the top of the deck, we can actually cast Thought Monitor using Emry and Lotus Petal by getting it back from the graveyard. Not bad, and we also get the Saga down. The opponent does nothing on my end step, untaps, plays a Scalding Tarn, fetches twice, and just plays a Sylvan Library. This is not enough to compete with the pressure that we're about to put upon them. The only cards here that I'm scared of from them are Uro, as well as powerful 2-drop cantrips like Expressive Iteration, so I'm going to cast Chalice the Void on 2 to try and prevent them from drawing into ways to either remove the Chalice or to put a threat on the table, and I'm fine using the 2 Lotus Petals to activate Urza's Saga because we have nothing else to get back with Emry. They pay 4 life with Sylvan Library to draw a card, they cast Life of the Loam into my Chalice, so we make a token, untap, get Shadow Spear and make a construct, equip the Shadow Spear to the Thought Monitor, and the opponent scoops the game. Going into boarding, the only relevant thing they showed us there was Life from the Loam. I'm scared of things like Wasteland and Life from the Loam, as well as Uro, so I'm just bringing in the Surgicals and boarding out the slow Shadow Spear, as well as the Petal, because while Petal isn't slow, it's bad to have lands in your deck that you just sacrifice for mana. We have a very interesting 6. Now we have many different decisions. We can Ancient Tomb, Chalice the Void turn 1, you can play Urza Saga, Pithing Needle turn 1, you can try and set up for Thought Monitor, so I tanked a long time what I wanted to do on turn 1, and that helped me decide what I wanted to bottom here, which I ended up going with Pithing Needle, because I thought that I was going to go all in on the Chalice of the Void. Anyways, the opponent starts off the game with a Flooded Strand, fetching a land, and casting a Ponder, which feels bad because of this Chalice of the Void, but it is what it is. Now we top deck a Surgical Extraction. This is great for us because it essentially acts as a Gitaxian Probe. Don't forget, we want to play this Chalice of the Void on 1, and if it resolves, then we now cannot cast a Surgical Extraction. So I end up deciding I'm going to Surgical Extraction the land, as we know they play Life from the Loam in the deck. It lets me see what's in their hand, and it lets us decide if we want to play Urza Saga, Petal Chalice, or Ancient Tomb Chalice. Now, as I'm exiling lands from their deck, I realize, wait a second, I want them to draw lands in this hand, so I only exiled 1 Flooded Strand in the main because I was just autopiloting, exiling cards. We see Ponder, Narset, and 2 lands, which means that I want to Urza Saga, Petal, and Chalice of the Void, because they only have 2 Wastelands in the deck from what we can see. The opponent doesn't seem to draw anything because they land go, and then they cast their Narset, minusing the Narset, getting a Force of Will, but because of Urza's Saga, we can make 2 constructs, get a Mox Opal so we can cast the Thought Monitor, and we can also kill the Narset through the combat step. They Force of Will my Thought Monitor post-combat, untap, play an Uro, get a land into play, and ship the turn back. As we draw an island, all we can do is attack in, play our island, and hold up hardcast Force of Will. In their draw step, they reveal a Terminus, we have to force it, but they have a Mystic Sanctuary to fetch from their fetch land, which lets them put Terminus back on top of their deck, presenting a way to wipe my board next turn. Not only that, they get Minx and Boo down, pump the token so that they can block one of my creatures instead of getting Uro back from the graveyard. Now being the top deck king we are, Thought cast off the top of the deck, let's cast that and see what we find. Otawara, bounce the token, smash in for lethal. What a great top deck. We have been running so hot this league so far. Now, I know, clickbait title, Delver killer, whatever. Well, this is the actual match against Delver. Watch me destroy and beat Delver down to a pulp like all of you should be doing on a day-to-day basis. We get that turn 1 Emry onto the stack, it hits the table, but they have a Lightning Bolt on their turn. We top deck an Ancient Tomb, but it doesn't matter, we're going to play Chalice of the Void on 1, and the Mox Opal's activated from our artifact lands, so we can play around days. And guess what? The Chalice hits the table. Against Delver, game 1, if you have a Chalice of the Void on the table, there's only 2 cards you need to be concerned about, Expressive Iteration and Murktide Region. They start casting their 1-drops, they get a Murktide down, but because we have Sai, we can now start casting artifacts. They can counter whatever they like, but every time we cast an artifact, we get a token, which is very hard to deal with, as we can just keep chumping the Murktide until we top deck either a Shadow Spear or an Urza Saga to start gaining us life and bashing in, which we do, and we move on to game 2. Against Delver, I like to bring in Metallic Rebukes and take a couple 0-mana artifacts because sometimes they can be rough top decks. In game 2, we have the Dream Hand against Delver, we got the Sai to produce jump blockers, we got the turn 1 Chalice of the Void, and we have multiple Sagas to play around Wasteland. Now there is a decision of if I want to play turn 1 Chalice of the Void or Saga Shadow Spear, and then have Ancient Tomb next turn, and I actually think that it's better to go for Chalice of the Void for this logic. If you play Urza Saga Shadow Spear, you're essentially committing yourself to make a construct on the next turn. If not, and you want to play Chalice of the Void, then you lose a construct, so I think it's way better to go Chalice of the Void than Urza Saga, Bauble, Shadow Spear, or you top deck a blue source, start off with Sai. I just think you want to try and put pressure on them and play Chalice of the Void and force out the counter. They just play a Steam Vents, play their Dragon Rage Channeler, ship the turn back. We top deck a very nice Metallic Rebuke, but with no blue sources, gotta go for that Shadow Spear, Chalice of the Void. It instantly resolves, so we know that they now don't have a counterspell. Then playing Tap Mystic Sanctuary makes me worried about a card like Energy Flux, but when they start casting their spells and also wasteland my Urza's Saga and just pass, I decide that we should just go all in because we have Force of Will and Metallic Root to back it up. They just scoop it up. This matchup is so favored. We destroyed the mirror in round 4, and in round 5 we sadly lost to a 4-color control deck because we couldn't beat all of their hate from the sideboard games. However, we do get 5 chests. I know you gambling degens love to see me open them, so we crack them open and actually find a Chalice of the Void, which is worth about 20 tickets, so a nice pickup. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment for the algorithm if you want to see more videos like this, expect more regular uploads, and check out this video because YouTube thinks you'll like it.